they are the stewards of the nation's technology ecosystem. It is definitely a monumental task in ensuring the advancement of technology and innovation is inclusive, impacting big and small companies, those living in urban and rural areas, and what our tech companies do in Malaysia expands to the regional and global arena as well. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to our next speaker, Mr. Sudev Banga, Managing Director of International Data Corporation, IDC ASEAN, on the topic Incorporating Intelligence in Innovation. He will be sharing with us some insights on how our counterparts in ASEAN are igniting innovation in their respective organizations and countries. Sudev heads the overall operations of the ASEAN countries' development, sales, consulting, and marketing. He works alongside local and global organizations, C-level executives in their aspirations in developing robust plans and strategies for emerging countries. Having previously led IDC's Southeast Asia Consulting Group, he brings with him rich experience at the country level by providing advice and thought leadership to chief executive officers, chief strategy officers, and country heads. He is also a frequent speaker at industry events across Southeast Asia on a wide range of topics and is frequently quoted in both local and international media such as Bloomberg, Asian Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and BBC. The virtual audience across the region is all yours now, Sudev.
Thank you very much, Malati, and a very good afternoon to everyone. As mentioned, my name is Sudev, and I have the pleasure of leading International Data Corporation out here in Southeast Asia. International Data Corporation, really quickly, is a market research and consultancy organization, very much steeped in ICT, but for many, many years, we've been looking at the adoption of technology into enterprises, especially as they accelerate towards a digital economy. So today's presentation, a lot of it is around corporate innovation as per the topic and why you're in attendance today. I'm going to take you through a few slides to give you a little bit of a feel of where we see corporate innovation in Southeast Asia, why this is really critical for you to pay attention to, and how you can put this as part of your digital innovation plans in the coming future. So I'll just get my slide going. Okay. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, again, igniting corporate innovation. And right now, if you see the subheader, we're talking a lot about incorporating intelligence as part of innovation. Now, many instances we've been staring at how organizations have been organizing their innovation effort over the past 10 years. And very recently, especially over the past 2 years in the wake of the pandemic, we've been seeing intelligence play a very critical part of innovation for many enterprises. And so over the next few slides, a lot of the idea on how big data analytics playing that critical role to drive an intelligent organization towards innovation of serving customers as well as productization is going to be at the fore of this discussion. But of course, very quickly, and we all know this phrase, and many instances we've seen this quote attributed to Einstein. There's an argument that maybe it's a Yale professor who might have said this, but I think it's really the essence of the quote that is really critical when we talk about corporate innovation. We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we use when we created them. Or very simply put, we cannot solve those issues in the same paradigm that it was created in. So in that regard, when we look at innovation, when we look especially around corporate innovation, I think a lot of you would have seen those very scary statistics or those presentations that might put fear into organizations from 10 years or 15 years ago about how organizations, the top 500 S&P organizations may be archaic over the next 20 years. And when you think about that over the past 10 to 15 years and those discussions were there, digital and digital innovation was something that was a little bit of a groundwork that was just being built at that point in time. Now, as we look at things in 2021 and moving to 2022 and beyond, we are seeing this come to the fore of many organizations when they accelerate towards helping or contributing towards what we call a digital economy. And a lot of this has changed simply because we are moving and transitioning to what we call a digital first world. From IDC's terminology, if you look at this, if you look at the statement that you see on this slide, entities and people are more connected and greater interdependencies in a digital first world. So everything is interconnected. You look across economies, you look across nations, you look at Malaysia, Southeast Asia, across out even Japan and Korea, we talk about Society 5.0. We talk about the interconnection of technology within society that blurs out into their work life, that blurs out into their play life as well. So ultimately, in this digital first world that we foresee happening very quickly and rapidly at this juncture, such an economy will expand the impact of digital technologies in the production and consumption of digital products, services, and experiences to at least 65% of the GDP. When you think about that and you think about the effort many nations and economies are making right now to actually accelerate the contribution of ICT or the ideals or the utilization of digital within the GDP, very quickly you're going to think of all the traditional enterprises as well as SMBs, SMEs out there who make up the composition of that GDP. So therefore, in that final statement, as you can see right at the bottom of the slide, in this economy, all industries will be driven and shaped by future enterprises. And the key essence here around future enterprises is innovation. And I'll get to that a little bit more in my presentation very shortly. So as we transition towards the digital first world, we cannot avoid the discussion of what has occurred in the world today over the past 18 to 24 months. The pandemic, unfortunately, has caused a lot of issues for enterprises in terms of how they work and how they operate. And traditional organizations, it was very hard for them to actually function in a very typical way that they were used to. SMBs, on the other hand, they had to quickly innovate to find different ways to serve into their customer base. Now, if you look at these three areas, these are the three areas on the left that we feel are never going to go away in view of what the pandemic had caused. So we had 2 years of progress in about 2 months when it comes to digitalization. There was an accelerated digital transformation that we saw across, especially towards Q4 of 2020, moving into 2021, as they started to build the fundamentals of what would eventually be a future enterprise to contribute towards a digital first economy. There were remote ways of working that could never scale. And I love this because when I look at this, and it did, I remember a statistic pre-pandemic that we had out to CIOs and CEOs across, many enterprises in Asia Pacific over what if they were to transfer their entire progress or their entire work life towards digital means. In other words, video conferencing, teleconferencing, not having to travel as much. And we had a whopping more than 90% actually come back to us and said, that is not possible. Lo and behold, the pandemic unfortunately forced that hand, and we found that we were able to function after getting used to a new way of working. Therefore, adapted to new work models was the new mantra of many enterprises over the past 18 months. And organizational change ultimately caught up with technology. Now, we've seen this as a little bit of a gap as technology accelerated in many countries and enterprises. However, policies and processes were a little bit left behind. Now that forced agenda was there, right? It caused a lot of support functions to actually change the way or the dynamics of how they operate in order for them to quickly adopt to digital. So there's no excuse anymore for finance or HR or procurement not to be able to function in the new digital first world as we see right now. Support services is a very critical part of any enterprise, and even innovation towards support services, which is an oft-forgotten element within enterprise innovation. This is something to actually consider in a large way as future enterprises emerge. So very quickly around the transitional phases, specifically in ASEAN, and this is how we saw Malaysian organizations actually move across the horizons, starting from Q4 2020. So from Q4 2020 to Q1 2021, what we call this the comeback towards the endurance phase, where expenditure became a little bit smarter. They were pinpointing the right technologies that's going to help to enable them, help to create customer engagement, help with productization or product innovation. There was a lot of acceleration in terms of the type of spending or the movement of budgets, even in Malaysian organizations when we had discussions with. And that led towards Q1 of 21, where they started to set their sights on being a future enterprise. Now, as they accelerated and they got excited, and many CIOs and CEOs I spoke to very early this year got really excited about the prospects digitalization could bring to their enterprise. However, infection rates unfortunately increased towards the middle part of the year. We saw Southeast Asia to be very hard hit together with India, and therefore there was a need to pivot to actually hone in on the right projects that's going to help to accelerate or move the needle for businesses over the next 5 years. So that is the horizon. So this led towards what was critical in Q3 on a long-term strategy, taking into account constant disruption. Now, constant disruption was something even towards Q4 to Q1, we didn't see many roadmaps actually consist of. Now, constant disruption became a key focal point for many CIOs to talk to their board of directors on the need for constant innovation. And that again is the essence of today's discussion and the essence of today's conference and event that you're attending today. So with that thinking, with that idea of the need of constant, of the occurrence of constant disruption and the need for constant innovation, this is the part now we're sitting in Q4, where the implementation of the plan is what's going to be critical for businesses moving forward over the next 5 years. So I'll cover that over the next few slides. So the future enterprise and innovation, the question I have for you in this session, you can think about it on your own. Is digitalization driving innovation or vice versa? Where is it within your enterprise right now? Are you looking at digitalization as a manner to adopt, then drive innovation or innovative thinking in your organization? Or are you having innovative thinking and applying digitalization as a way to support it? Maybe this is something to think about over the next few slides. But I'll share with you from a global statistic, and I have a little bit into Asia Pacific and Malaysia over the next couple more slides. The top innovation and intelligence priorities to transform IT the next 12 months, you can see automation, emerging technologies have stood out as the main areas of investment for many organizations to help to drive innovation within organizations. So the essence of this thinking is that we need to enable our teams to be innovative. We need to take off the laborious tasks from many of these individuals in order for them to cobble together and have time to think of intelligent thoughts, to think of creative thoughts, or to think outside the box so that they're able to innovate for the prospect of their business over the next 5 years. And this is where pervasive intelligence and DevOps and software innovation factories come in, because all this enablement around automation is really what's going to give individuals more time to innovate or to think on elements of innovation or collaboration that they will need. So closed or open innovation at this point in time, there's still a little bit of a debate on whether organizations should be thinking one way or another. From our regard or our thoughts on this, there's really no right or wrong. It's really what suits the organization, which is going to be important. But the fundamentals need to be there. You can't wake up, unfortunately, you can't wake up one day to say that I want to innovate. Now, it's a bit of a cultural movement. It's a bit of a mindset change. It's a little bit more around digital innovation now that you have to think about. And, these are elements and KPIs that will change over the next 5 years for you as an organization as well. And as I bring this more into Southeast Asia and Malaysia specifically, these are the 5 elements that we see are standing out very strong for Malaysian organizations to want to innovate. Now, there's really only two reasons why organizations traditionally want to innovate. One of it is to make sure they remain competitive. So they take a product and they are able to actually innovate it to ensure there's a differentiator against their competitor. And another way is really based on a customer requirement or a customer need or a changing of the customer. Now, new digital offerings as a platform as well out into customer engagement, that seems to be a very huge push towards organizations in Malaysia to rethink how they are staring at their productization or their business models at this point. Now, data capitalization is helping on a lot of that. There's a lot of thinking now on how data can actually help me innovate in a much smarter way. No longer am I just cobbling together and banging out ideas with 5 of my colleagues, but now it's sitting there and banging out ideas with 5 of my colleagues with intelligence and with data to support the decisions that we want to make. So data capitalization is something which is very interesting for us when we look at enterprises in Malaysia and the drive towards being intelligent enterprises at this point on how they are now bringing this as part of their journey in innovation. Then you look at supply chain and automation. Why these two elements are important for us, especially in Southeast Asia and Malaysia, is because of the huge manufacturing base we have and the disruption towards the supply chains that occurred during the 18 to 24 months, the past 18 to 24 months, that we need to continue to avoid moving ahead. Should unfortunately another black swan or a disruption occur, we need to avoid huge disruptions towards the supply chain or even to the factory floor. So this brings me to a little quote, as you can see over there on the bottom right-hand side, which is one of my favorite quotes, by the way. The idea around technology, is it an investment or is it an expenditure? And I love this quote because, and if this Malaysian FMCG manufacturer CIO, if, you will know who you are. If you're tuning in today, thank you very much for this really great quote, because the idea now is to view ICT as a point of investment for a return at a later point, rather than to say, I'm purchasing something and it's money out or a cost out. And that's how he was able to move the needle with his board of directors in order to invest into ICT. And we're seeing more of these discussions occurring. As you can see, the new paradigm of digital adoption right now is technology as an investment. So as corporates start thinking about innovation, as corporates start thinking about how to productize and reach out to new customers, they are exploring different elements or ideas of technology to help to move that needle. Now, Malaysia against Asia Pacific ex-Japan organizations, you can see Malaysian organizations are thinking a little bit more in terms of how they want to sustain, maintain, but also to add and shift in terms of their ICT spending. On the right-hand side, there's a Malaysian stat around a 10% increase in cloud spending intention, acceleration around AI and analytics applications as well to help them to be more intelligent as an organization. Industry IoT is something that's picking up, and not just because of an impending 5G, because those are use cases that we have to talk a little bit more about. But as that occurs, industries want to be prepared, again, around supply chain, around factory floors. How does the agriculture sector survive over the next 5 years if you're overly traditional? How do you contribute more to the GDP or even the digital economy? So there's huge interest from industry IoT as well. So spending intention has increased. And security, of course, this is a very interesting topic, is a very tricky topic as well. How do you balance innovation and security? How do you sandbox? How do you pilot? How do you test bed? This is a question a lot of organizations should be thinking about when they want to embark on innovative projects on new productization. The very simplistic term, or I guess a simplistic way I'm going to put it, is that no matter what you sandbox, no matter what you do in terms of innovation or what you want to pilot out, just never play with customer data. That is going to be the most important part. You can use it internally, but never use it as a point where on a launch, if there are issues, that's where the trickiness between innovation and security has to work hand in hand. It's not mutually exclusive. It's something that actually has to work very much in tandem with each other. So how does innovation factor into a future enterprise? If you look at the stats on the left, you can see 30% of Malaysian organizations feel a chief innovation officer is required, against the backdrop of Asia Pacific organizations who feel that 45% of them feel that they need a chief innovation officer. So do you need a chief innovation officer? Is that what is required by your organization? Now we're seeing organizations who started to adopt the idea of a chief innovation officer to actually be able to accelerate their innovation plans, but it has to be in tandem with the wider organization needs and goals. Innovation cannot be for the sake of innovation. When we look at the top business priorities for enterprises, cost savings is always going to be there. That's never going to go away. It's been there for 30, 35 years, 40 years. Cost savings for an organization and becoming more profitable is going to continue to be there. Now we talk about operational efficiency. Of course, that's another element which is very critical. And you can see from Malaysian enterprises, that is the most important part of their enterprise or their business priority over the next 24 months. But you now see the terminology of innovation come up. And I can tell you over the past 24 months, if you look at the stats, if you look at the data, you do not see innovation factor in as one of the top 5. So we're seeing innovation actually pop up in a very big way for Malaysian enterprises as well. So we're pretty excited on how Malaysian organizations can go forward. And the next segment of my discussion is hopefully providing you some guidance on how you can embark on this innovation journey. So incorporating intelligence, the future enterprise playbook, I hope there's some key takeaways here that you can go back with and start to ponder about as you embark on your journey. So innovation investments are shifting as companies mature in digitalization. And that's very much what we're seeing here in Malaysia as well. Many enterprises are maturing in terms of their digitalization adoption. We're seeing corporates starting to think a little bit bigger, and we're seeing corporates start to reach outside of their usual ecosystem of partners to start collaborating with startups and to start getting different ideas on how to productize and move the needle forward. So you can see from left to right, from digital resistor, basically organizations which are a little bit overly traditional, harder for them to actually digitalize. You can see many very traditional economies actually sitting out in the digital resistor zone towards what is called a digital disruptor all the way to the right. Now, these are the investment areas around innovation that we see. For digital resistor, digital explorer, and digital player, right to the middle, you can see the idea of hiring new talent and acquiring ideas from the outside to be actually the top areas of which they're willing to put their money at. While digital transformers and disruptors, they almost rather have a little bit more close innovation. They rather think a little bit more and say, I have all these intelligent minds or big groups of people or swaths of people around, and we have the right platforms that we can utilize to innovate. Can we train and can we use that as a manner to actually innovate and think around a different manner of doing things? Now, this brings me back to strategy models around the Ansoff matrix. If many of you here might be strategy consultants or working in strategy in your organization, you start thinking of the Ansoff matrix that finally brings you to the point of diversification. Now that's a very simplified way of looking at innovation, but ultimately diversification at the essence of it is to take the current product and to find a different way to diversify out, like what Crocs did with those little, I think they're called pogs, if I'm not mistaken, and they started putting those on the sandals, and they started to make a whole different income stream because they did that on top of the base income stream of selling their sandals. So the right thinking around Ansoff matrix is now playing into enterprise corporate innovation initiatives, but now they're called design thinking. Now it's called human-centered innovation, which is a very hot topic right now to think about, because considering empathy as a manner of how your customers are reacting to your products and services, that is a very critical element right now as you innovate towards a new customer segment or market. Sourcing of new talent, M&A activity, you can see the statistic over there around $51.5 billion US dollars across 329 M&A deals in 2020. I'm citing a stat from Merger Market. That represents about 6.2% of total APAC M&A value. That was a little bit of a drop from the year before, according to the report, but not every organization has that ability to just merge or acquire. Therefore, corporate innovation initiatives tend to still be very much close and internal, and there's a preference towards doing that at most hiring someone external to actually try to push the needle in terms of that innovation ideas outside of the box. But we see that changing, and that's good news for a lot of startups. If you're in the room right now, if you're thinking, how do I get into this? How do I be part of corporates? We're seeing that corporates are reaching out across the field. They're starting to think about the need for different ideas as part of their industry. No longer archaic style of doing things. Now we need something very different. And usually startups have a very good recipe to provide to many organizations, traditional organizations out there, so that they are a little bit more ready for the next 5 years. So enabling the enterprise to thrive and build resiliency. I won't go through all this, but ultimately digitalization on IT becomes the operating system to drive innovation within a given enterprise. Now I'm going to focus on the CIO imperative right in the middle around innovation and intelligence. The idea here is for the CIO to equip the enterprise with the right tools to foster innovation at the edge, to make sure LOBs have data at their fingertips. You know, there's democratization of data for many different individuals to actually utilize, and a way to empower the workers to be able to make decisions and to constantly provide their ideas upstream and downstream. And this ultimately, again, is going to free up a lot of these LOBs and departments to be able to work across the board and to work across the ecosystem. And our future, as we see this right now around a digital first economy, will ultimately be the future of ecosystems. Industries are going to have to work across the line, across the board with each other in order to survive the next changed economy in the next 5 years. But adopting intelligence has been, unfortunately, not our strong point in Southeast Asia. Now, going back to the statement I made very early on around the need to foster innovation, and that comes from intelligent capabilities to drive that fostering of innovation, that is unfortunately not our strong suite. Now, ASEAN organizations are looking at that as they build towards data optimization investments, but that is still a little bit behind. And as we plow forward, it's becoming a priority technology investment. And we do expect that chart on the right top-hand corner to change over the next 24 months. That's going to move a little bit there. We're going to hopefully break out from the laggard zone where intelligence is going to help to drive that new agenda for enterprises in Southeast Asia. Because ultimately, in bringing this together and forging the future enterprise, which is built on the fundamental of innovation, we are going to have to make sure that shift, or that paradigm shift into technology as just a tool, becomes a huge enabler for corporates. And we look at the top 5 areas which is important for a future enterprise to consider as they move forward as part of the digital economy, building and leveraging of digital platforms and ecosystems. That is a huge move away from majority of traditional organizations in terms of how they function and work and interact with their customers at this point in time. A digital first culture, that's not a mindset that many organizations have. Right now, support functions still tend to be very traditional. Now there's going to be a move towards being very digital first in everything they do. The shift from management orientation, so to the board of directors supporting investments and not viewing things as a cost. Innovation to support business reinvention. That's the key right there. As digitalization comes in, digital innovation creeps in. Innovation to support business reinvention is a very key point for surviving and thriving over the next few years. And increased focus on sustainability, ESG, you cannot escape that. As you innovate, as you productize, as you address your new customer, that's where ESG is going to be a very critical point for ASEAN organizations going ahead. So you look at ASEAN top business priorities, as I mentioned, innovation never used to be there. But now we are seeing innovation as a top area of business priority, and we couldn't be more excited about that. Because once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're tuning in, you're looking and thinking about, is my organization set up right? If we're thinking around innovating, if we're thinking around digital innovation, ultimately, the creep towards it is going to be across ecosystems. We are seeing these partnerships already occurring. You know, there's a couple of examples on the right between Li and Feng, JD.com, up there in terms of supply chain innovation. They started to partner to actually extend that towards a global supply chain. Zulik Pharma in terms of working across different ecosystem partners around their operations, as well as monitoring and capacity and looking into ESG, as well as provisioning of their products. These are areas where they started to adopt technology as a manner and work and collaborate with the right partners in order to expand their markets as well as customer segmentations. But if you look at the left, it's all ultimately an ecosystem play. So reach out to your partner, reach out to your partner's partner, reach out to solutioning providers, reach out towards startups out there who are able to provide you a different lens towards the world and start to innovate and co-innovate and co-create, because that is going to be the future of the digital economy. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I hope you got some good key takeaways today, and I'm always looking forward to hearing from you. Feel free to drop me an email and I'll definitely respond. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.